Hello, everybody. Thanks for your patience. There was some major technical difficulties with the webcam again. um, and because we are very transparent and authentic and honest, you're not gonna believe what it actually was. So what ended up happening was that the default setting that we used to stream always was using our webcam. But in this case, it for some reason went back to the Apple webcam, the default one that's included on computers. So our webcam sits on top of where the Apple one is. So it's just a black screen. And we were playing around with that for quite a few minutes. So I appreciate you guys' patience. And once again, I'm just staying true to my fellow Mexicanos. For the people who are just tuning in and joining us, appreciate you guys for checking us out and the live stream. This is live coffee time with the Chamingers. And we're going to have some exciting stories to share today. And of course, it's all going to happen over coffee. Cheers. So as you guys tune in and join, please drop a comment, leave a like, say what's up. Definitely want to greet all of you guys because we couldn't do it without your support. And we couldn't do it without my mom. I'm glad that you're there. She's like, oh my goodness, why are they late? Enjoy your coffee. Thank you, Mom. How are you doing? As you guys can tell, parents can be great support. So make sure you call your parents, say hi to them, and thank them for supporting you in whatever you decide to do. It means a lot to have that. And Mom, and I know Dad is there too. It means so much that you guys are always supporting us and cheering us on because at the end of the day, we couldn't do without you. Are you drinking coffee, Mom? If you hear some rackety rack noise in the background, it's Leon eating his bone.
Hello, Lee. Hello, Leo.
So we just got Stephanie joining us over here. You want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. How are we today?
I love it. That's the Chaminger greeting. If you guys haven't already noticed that from our podcast episodes. Can't believe it's already Thursday.
I know. The week has just flown by.
Well, how does it feel for you now that this is our second week of doing this post-launch? I mean, has it like sunk in? Has it felt weird?
It's insane. Well, since we've been working on this for, a couple months now, it's just crazy to think that it's only the second week of everyone hearing our content and, yes, being able to tune in and share and like and comment and all that stuff. So, hello, Lee. Yes, Leon got a bath today. But yeah, it's just crazy to think that it's only the second week because it feels like it's been so much longer because it has been longer for us. But I'm just glad that we're able to share the message now with everyone.
Yep. Same, 100%. It just feels good to talk about it and get feedback and hear that people are loving it and it's resonating. And, there's still, I will say this, as I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch the recording afterwards. And again, if you're just tuning in, thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you. Love you guys. This is a work in progress. This is growth. But I know a lot of people, it's a big commitment to like watch a live stream and full thing. So even if you can just tune in for 5 minutes, drop a comment, say hi. We appreciate it. And you can always watch the recording later. But if not, 1 minute means a lot. So appreciate you guys. And it's going to be interesting for you to see how much we grow over time. I mean, it's interesting for us. But like when you do so much prep work to make sure that the launch goes well and that you set yourself up for success. So what I mean by that, like we've been so busy since launch. And we can't work on some of the things, like, for example, recording all the episodes that we want.
Yep.
So because we had a backlog, we are in a great spot.
Yep.
You know, and it's just a lot of things that people don't really think about. And it's why I would say most people fail new projects is they just don't anticipate the things that are going to come up. And you can't predict everything, but making sure that, you know, you have a path so that you can just do your core duties without interruption. I would say that's been the key.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's see what Mama Mia says over here.
Hello, Leon.
For you guys who didn't tune in last week, the way the coffee stream works, well, the origin, the idea behind it, the preaching of the message is that we embrace the European tradition of doing coffee daily, where it's kind of like an opportunity for people, family, friends, to get together and chat over coffee. Because, again, I still think that it's awesome that a lot of families do chats over dinner time, but there's not enough families and friends that really sit down and have conversations. So having something else, an opportunity to have that with people, is so powerful. Like just sitting down and having coffee and doing a little more than small talk, you know?
Yeah.
Not just sharing the latest memes and talking about weather.
Although that is fun.
But something a little more substance is important, I feel.
Yep, I agree. I mean, it goes along with continuing to grow as well. You know, like having real conversations and actually talking about things that matter.
Exactly. Hello, Real Talk. Shout out to our podcast series called Real Talk. It's a series where my brother and I really share our background growing up and living in 6 different countries, moving every 1 to 2 years, and exploring that craziness. And, you know, it messed us up, but it's also, in some ways, but it mostly set us up for success because it gave us so much experience and knowledge and benefits that we just had to figure out how to manifest them. And we share that story about how we figured that out. But I love the Real Talk. I know it scares a lot of people when all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's have a proper conversation. A lot of people resonate with it, which has surprised me, but there's definitely some people that are like, oh my.
Well, I mean, a lot of people aren't used to having like a real talk with people in general, but also their family members specifically. I mean, a lot of families are open to having those real talks, but you know, it may not get into a super deep talk like that. So like about your feelings, your true feelings, not just what the other person wants to hear.
I love that. I just wanted to finish something and then I wanted to keep talking about that. But I was telling a story about the European tradition, and why I brought it up was because last episode, my mom was like, hey, actually, European coffee time maybe starts at 2:30, but it's more like 3 to like, what was
5.
it? 3 to 5.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, it's 3 to 5 somewhere in the world. That's what I believe.
It is. That is true.
So that's what we're going to go with. Hey, you got a hello, Stephanie.
Hello, everybody.
She's the local celebrity whenever she makes appearance. It's
Yep,
like
exactly.
everyone appreciate this because she doesn't pop up often, but when she does, it's a major moment. Well, I'm glad that you have seen that and you appreciate it because, well, otherwise we probably wouldn't be here, right? If you didn't appreciate it, because I basically just do that a lot. I know that it was something that even with my family and my aunts and uncles and stuff like that, like they weren't always super open to that. So I'm sure a lot of them are like, oh my, like, look at him now. I remember I always tell my parents, I mean, you've seen it when we did our video calls. I'm like, she knows everything, everything. And they're like always so terrified. They're like, what do you mean everything? And I'm like, everything. What are your thoughts of that?
Well, I love knowing everything about you. Although, I feel like there are some stories that haven't come to the surface yet, but not that you're withholding them. You just don't remember them because there have been a couple recently where it's like, oh, never heard that one before. But I think it's really valuable to have that close relationship with someone and to just be able to know everything about the other person.
Take notes, everybody. That's how it's done. Well, I'm glad. Cheers.
Cheers.
So let's talk about this comment right here. So right, it's like not having a beer before 6. So in Germany, there was this guy called Manfred.
Now, is this a made up story or is this a real story?
Is it a real story?
Like the coffee time.
Oh no. Hello, getting called out. It's real. So, I mean, this guy loves food, good drinks, coffee, all that stuff. Like, he is a foodie. So, one of the things, though, was that he enjoyed having his beers, like, big time. And, a lot of people are like, well, you shouldn't drink before a certain hour. Usually that's kind of like why happy hour is what it is. Like, at that point, it's almost like, okay, now you can drink.
Yeah.
But before that, it's like, hey, probably should tone it down. Like, if you start, like, we started at 11 right now, people would be like, wow, we're starting early. I mean, it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
But regardless. So when we would go to Germany as kids, we would sometimes hear him and say, like, when like someone asked him, like, if they wanted a beer or we were going out to a restaurant, he's like, yeah, no, you don't have beer before 6. Like, that's like the rule. That's like proper etiquette. That's like what you should do, and all this stuff like that. He also had some other sayings like, don't eat seafood if you're not close to the water.
Yep.
I mean, these are things that I remember, and they're true. He's like, if you are at a restaurant, it's like, well, how close to the water are you? And like, if you're probably more than 50 miles, he's like, do not eat seafood. Like, those are like his policies. So then we were staying at my grandma in that small little village in Germany, and he started having a beer earlier. And I'm pretty sure it was me who called him out. But I'm like, or maybe my brother. I wouldn't be surprised if it was my brother too. He's like, it's not 6 yet. What are you doing? He's like, oh ho ho, it's 6 somewhere in the world.
He's not wrong. But what I'll say to that is, you mentioned starting drinking at 11, but what I always hear is you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning. So that's what I have to say in rebuttal.
I mean, otherwise mimosas wouldn't have a thing.
Exactly. And Bloody Marys.
Yep. Gotta help support the bars and the restaurants,
Exactly.
So, wanted to share a few stories today that I think are going to be very interesting for people to hear, and I would love to get your feedback as well. But again, audience participation is encouraged, and we love that, and we want people to share their thoughts as well. And if you guys are up for it, let us know. We could actually invite you onto the stream and hear your audio, and you can chat with us live. So, so the first story that I want to talk about is a coffee story, and it was during my time at Wyndham. So by time, I need better about not naming companies. Oopsie, cut it.
We can't cut it. It's live.
Kill the stream. Like news reporters who are like, actually something crazy is happening in the background, and they just like cut the stream or the feed all of a sudden. So it was at this timeshare company, and I pretty quickly I was identified as really good at what the job required. Like, I learned it, and I was perfecting it more every day. But I was encouraged to mentor people. And at first I wasn't getting paid for it, but I'm like, heck yeah, because, it was one of my first real jobs, and I actually really liked it, and I started seeing a potential for a lot of money. So, I wanted to be smoozing the bosses and all that stuff. And plus, it was the first time I'm mastering sales, so I feel most salespeople go through this, where you just become an absolute smoozer. Like it was insane, you know.
Got to get people to like you.
Yeah, there's a way without overdoing it. But anyway, so um, I went all out with like my mentorship thing. I mean, there's a story for another time. Like my very first mentorship, I want to save it for probably the podcast episode that I do with Iago, because he was my first mentee, my Brazilian friend. But essentially, what I started doing after then, I mentored a few people. I got promoted to a lead, basically a supervisor, and I would start buying the employees that would work on my shift coffee. I mean, I was making pretty good money. I was making way more than them just because of my promotion. And I was selling, literally about 50 times more to them. So it was significant. And it's a very difficult job. And, sometimes we were out in the rain or there's snowing outside, and we were expected to stay outside by the Seattle Space Needle and continue selling. So,
And some people are better at it than others.
yes.
You
So,
being one of the better ones.
thank you. The point of that was just, it almost was like I felt like bad that these people are struggling, and the little things like that can help them. So that I would encourage them. I would kind of give them tips and say, hey, try this next time, do this next time, or learn this, or see how I do this. Just listen, stand right next to me and just pay attention, and try to imitate it, because it's repeatable. And some people would listen to me, some people wouldn't, but people loved the coffee, and the reason why I was giving the coffee was I also wanted to be like the liked supervisor, the manager, or stuff like that, because I feel like I struggled telling people no, like, oh hey, now you guys, because if I was the supervisor, the only one present there was no manager or anything. I was like in charge of keeping people focused and making sure that they're working and no one's distracted, like all these pieces, right? But I was telling them, I'm like, hey, look, it's going to be 100% different when you work with me. I don't care if you work or not. But if you're not going to work, then just get away and don't disturb us, because we're here to make money. But if you want to hang out, just go behind the booth, work a little bit, hang out. There's no problem with that with me, because I know that this job, you can only do like bursts of energy. Like grind for an hour, take an hour break. Grind for an hour, take an hour break. 9 hours of yelling at random people gets to you. So I would tell them that. I would get them their coffees. And everyone always requested to work with me. Everyone wanted to work with me. Like everyone was begging the manager. People had better performance with me. Like my plan was working. Obviously, that's part of the reason why I ended up leaving, because the other managers started getting jealous and mad. But I was buying things to get people to like me. It felt good to be this adored, to be this appreciated. And it really was this inherent flaw of mine already that I hadn't identified yet, was this need to be a people pleaser. I could have got their respect. I could have had a great environment without having to buy them anything. Once in a while, make it special. But then, like, people literally almost came to expect it. They're like, no coffee today? I'm like, no. And I was almost like offended when they would ask that. But then I realized, I'm like, I've literally trained them or conditioned them to expect that.
Yep.
So it really made me real. That was one of like the big first times that I'm like, oh shit, I'm a people pleaser. And it comes down to, having moved so much growing up in 6 different countries.
And just being able to connect with people and finding a way to make that connection. And so that was your way of doing it for just anyone. It didn't matter someone's personality. Obviously, if they didn't like coffee, that might be a little bit of a problem. But anyone that does like coffee, that's a way to connect with those people.
Exactly. So, I mean, well, what are your thoughts on that? I want you to keep going. Maybe, do you feel like you can relate? Do you understand?
I totally understand that. And I have done similar things, not every day, just because I normally work with a lot of people, or I did work with a lot of people at once. So I wouldn't necessarily buy coffee for everyone every day, but there were definitely times where I was like, oh, maybe I'll make some cupcakes, or maybe I'll make some treat or something like that and bring it to work. And there were times where I did get coffee or donuts or things like that. And I mean, everyone was always super appreciative, but I mean, I don't think that it really got me any further, any closer to where I wanted to be. It was just something to boost morale, but it didn't really bring anything else for me anyway.
You didn't market it hard enough or milk it hard enough. Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the things like thinking about like in sales where you could visit a client office and you like bring something. I mean, it literally is one of the easiest ways to just get people to be a little more appreciative of you. And it's crazy that that's what works. I mean, that's why we have party etiquette where you go to someone's place, like they invite you over for dinner, you bring like a bottle of wine or something. And it's just because I always just think about it. I mean, like I said, I used to be a big gamer. And so like a meter, 0 to 100, you start that day, that dining part or dinner party at 0, you come in with a bottle of wine, you're ready at 20.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if you just greeted them, now you're at 1. So it just gives you like a head start. It gives you an advantage. But I feel like then there's that dark side of it, right? Where you're so desperate to do it and works, but you now are getting people to like you for the wrong reason. I'm like, do they like me because, I mean, when at work it was different because I was encouraging them and all that stuff. But then, let's say even outside of work, I'm like, okay, guys, happy hour on me. We did great today. Like I would motivate people, but like if we get 10 sales today, and most of those people, like if I got 5 of the 10, and then there was 3 other people, most of them haven't even got 1 in like a month, and then they would get sales, and like all my bosses would be like, "How is that possible? We were gonna fire them next week," you know. So like, it was working,
Yep.
But then you'd go there, you buy them drinks, like on me, literally. It gets expensive too,
Yep.
and now people like expect that and want that, and I'm like, do they like me because I'm a cool, funny guy, because I am international, or is it because I'm getting them stuff?
Yep.
So I started getting milked, and that was kind of like a harsh realization. I don't think anyone necessarily did it. Like if you guys are watching, I do not fault you guys. I'm not mad at you, but it happened.
And I think that some people, they don't do it intentionally. It's just like, oh, well, they're offering, sure. They're not, some people probably are doing it intentionally, but I don't think everyone necessarily was. And so it's just sad to like view it from the other perspective, like view it, you were doing it for them, and then were they viewing it from your perspective, being like, I'm doing all these things for you guys. Are you actually appreciating what I'm doing for you, or are you just taking advantage of it?
You know, you're right that not everyone is always doing it out of malice. That's a big thing that took me some time to understand, because if every time you walked into a Starbucks, a particular Starbucks, they always gave you a free breakfast sandwich with your coffee that you paid for, it just almost becomes like the norm. So then the one time that they don't do it, you can be like, well, what happened to the breakfast sandwiches,
Yeah.
And they were just doing that to get more customers, right? But now all of a sudden it's like that's the norm. They educated you, they conditioned you, they taught you that that's what happens if you go here.
Yep.
And you weren't trying to like milk them necessarily. I mean, a lot of people probably like, oh, keep going to that Starbucks. There's
Yeah.
going to be those people,
Yep.
but there's going to be a lot of people that they're going to go there every day anyway, regardless if they get a breakfast sandwich or not. But then even those people are going to be like, what happened to the breakfast sandwich promotion?
Yep.
And that was kind of mind blowing for me when I had that realization, because there's people that you almost like fault or view negatively because they do these things to you, but it's not. I mean, it's just interesting though, and this is that kind of where it goes to the next story, but it's very similar topic, and it's the topic of boundaries. And it's like when you put that boundary and you're like, no mas, no more, and when you see how people react, that's what's super super interesting. Because I mean, I'm just gonna reference continuing like the story about like work and buying things for coffee and all this stuff like that. I just remember like buying people shots and stuff like that. the first time I said no, like people were like, well, what, why not, man? Like, what's wrong? Like, are you mad at us? I'm like, that's crazy that people would react that way. Right. I mean,
Yep.
you looked like you had a comment about that.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think people being more self-aware would be helpful in these scenarios. If you say, if you don't offer to take everyone to happy hour or something, they shouldn't be like, well, what's wrong? They should just be more aware of all the things that you are doing for them and realize that it's not something that any of the other managers do, and it's not something that you have to do, like that's coming out of your pocket. So if people were more self-aware and viewed it differently, then they would be more appreciative of the things that you are doing for them, or understand that it's not the norm.
I think that, I mean, that's definitely going to be an episode that we talk about more on a full episode, but, and it's going to be constantly referenced, but I think it's just so interesting to me to think back and realize that I basically taught people to treat me that way, you know? And when you realize that, that's kind of like a harsh reality check. You're like, oh man, this could have been avoided or prevented, but it makes you realize, because like so many people are like, oh, don't like, I need to keep giving people stuff and then they'll like me more, or I need to always say yes to like every invitation or all these things. I'm going to do things that I don't want to do and I'll do it for them and they'll like me more. And maybe it'll help once in a while, but you realize very quickly that scarcity is the key. Like, you make it special. Like, you only buy them coffee once a month. They don't know when. The one time they get it, they're gonna be like, "Oh man, Fabian bought us coffee! Yeah, it's a Fabian coffee day."
And I will say, if you are buying coffee every day for everyone that you work with, they're not only going to expect that, even if they wanted to bring coffee that day for everyone else, for everyone, then they're going to be like, well, Fabian always brings coffee, so I'm not going to do that.
Yep. So
So
it's
maybe they wanted to reciprocate.
oh.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that in there as well, because, maybe no one had that thought, but
Yeah.
I just thought of that. I'm like, well, maybe other people wanted to be the good guy and bring coffee for everyone, but they were like, oh, Fabian always does that. They should have brought donuts or breakfast sandwiches.
Well, I think that's when, I mean, again, maybe like, and it wasn't every day, just so you guys know, but it was a lot, because and it definitely, like I said, it worked. Everyone was excited to work with me, but I think that's when you realize that most people will not take the initiative. And what I mean by that, like, they could have came up to me like, "Hey, man, let me get the coffee today," because that's what I would have done. And this is again another story for another episode, but it's like, I used to think that everyone thought the way I did. Literally, like, they view the world the way I did, and I'm like, oh, there's literally no way, because half these people have only lived in their same city their entire life. So how could they? You know, I'm like, these people aren't gonna go out of the way and be the bigger man and be like, no, 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 I'll cover it. You've done so much for us. We appreciate you. Sad reality is that maybe 1 out of 10 people would do that. And if someone like buys me a coffee, I'm gonna buy them a coffee the next day.
Yep.
Like, that's just who I am.
Yep.
And you realize very quickly that most people aren't like that. And there's nothing, you don't have to, right? Because at the end of the day, it was a gift. It was,
Exactly.
hey, take this. So I'm not expecting it in return. But when you don't get it, you realize, oh, wow. And that was something that took me a long time to work on, is like, if I give someone something, have zero expectations in return. And that took a long time to get to, because that's hard, you know? Don't do it, get them to like you. Just do it because you want it to make them have a better workday and perform better. And that's it. And it was kind of crazy to think about. But any other commentary about that? Because I do want to share about the boundary piece, something that happened in my other job. But I wanted to...
No, go right ahead.
So it's the topic of, we're still talking about boundaries and like teaching people how to treat you and all this stuff like that. And one of the things that was super interesting to me was, always have been and always will be but I think a lot of people are always surprised now when I like say no to things or just like ignore them if they do something that is not all right. In the past, I was just very cooperative. Like I would say yes, and I still believe that more people. I remember I definitely got into some not trouble, but got some weird looks that I would before tell people like even like at my times or thing like guys, all of you just need to get better at saying yes more. And like you're telling this to like some random like 21-year-old girl that we just started. It's like just say yes. You know, it's like, oh, see, like it's
Don't want to send the wrong message there.
exactly. But so I would in general be pretty agreeable. And like for example, someone has I scheduled a meeting with someone internal between coworkers and employees. And we were going to have like a strategy call or work on a PowerPoint together. And then someone else called them who said, "Hey, I only can do this specific hour." And it kind of like overlapped with mine. It's like, can you change it? And like, they're like, this is the only one that works for me. That's not true. They could have waited till next week.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to wait till next week. So they say that to the person. And this person is like, oh, I know who I'm going to call. Or maybe it was just that they're not even that specific time slot. Fabian, because Fabian will always say, yeah, you know why? Because I was like, it doesn't bother me. Cool. Now I'm just going to chill and like have, if it's after 6 p.m., have a drink, you know? But it opens up my schedule. I'm like, it's not a big deal. I can fit it in tomorrow or the day after. So it was pretty agreeable, right? But now if every time you're saying yes, every time they have a request, like, oh, I can ask him when to change to anything and he'll always say yes. So then what happens is they stop prioritizing your work and your time. They don't respect your time at all anymore. So then I was like, yeah, this is not happening anymore. So every time they tried to do that, and it just constantly kept happening, right? Because I just always agreed to try to change on me, even last minute or something like that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. This is the only time I can do it, and I have a meeting tomorrow. So you tell me what you want me to do. I'll do the meeting without you, and I'm going to invite my boss, but let me know. And if he asks me why the presentation is not ready and why you're not on, it's like, because you couldn't make it, because you had to reschedule for another rep. And then I would get complaints. They would talk to their manager, and because they were afraid to have confrontation. And so just me standing up for my time and my meetings caused me to get in trouble with this person and their boss because they were afraid to talk to me about it and they were disrespecting me. But just this moral of that story basically comes down to don't let people walk over you, create boundaries, stick to them. And if you stick to them or you stop like buying people coffee or you stop agreeing to changing your meeting time for them and they get mad at you, they were taking advantage of you. If they don't get mad at you and understand and like, oh yeah, well, let's come up with a solution, then they weren't. And sometimes people do it without realizing, right? Like we talked about. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, those people, they're going to apologize. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that I've been doing that to you.
Yep.
But if they actually were doing it maliciously, they're going to get mad at you. And it's really interesting. I recommend it to everyone. Start saying no. Start saying no. Do it for a week straight to people. And anyone who gets mad at you or who throws a fit or does, like refuses to talk to you now because you said no to them, you didn't go out to the club with your girlfriends all of a sudden, and they now like alienate you for like a month, they were taking advantage of you. They were using you. What are your thoughts on that? That was a lot, but I'm very passionate about that topic.
But because, I mean, when you were talking about it, I was just thinking about, how I could relate it, those types of situations in my life. And I mean, that I used to work in restaurants and that would happen a lot in the restaurant industry where people were like trying to get rid of shifts. And I always used to be, yes, I would always say yes. If someone wanted to switch shifts or they wanted to get rid of their shift, I'm like, yep, I'll take your shift or whatever. And then it was a few years ago that I just started saying no. I said, I need at least a week in advance notice or a few days. I will not take a same day shift. I started saying no, and then people stopped asking me. So it was just really interesting to see the change where it was like I would always say yes. I was always the go-to person, and then I started saying no, and people started realizing that I was going to be probably their last resource, and I would probably still say no.
I love
But
that.
yeah.
Was there anything that made you kind of like realize that?
I just started realizing that I didn't have any time for myself just because I was always picking up other people's shifts and I didn't have a day off, because I was just working every day that week or several weeks in a row. And I was like, I just need some time for myself. I don't have that right now. And I need to stop saying yes and start saying no.
I know it's funny. Like I went from the everybody should say yes more to everyone should say no a lot more.
Well, when you mentioned that saying yes, there's, I think it's a movie on Netflix. It's like Yes Day or something where the parents have to say yes to everything that the kids want for like a day or something. I haven't watched
We haven't
it.
watched it
Yeah.
yet. Yeah.
But, and I was just thinking about that when you were mentioning it. And I'm like, I think I don't think you should be saying yes to every single thing that your kids are asking you to do. Like if they say, hey, let's go out and do drugs, or I want to go do drugs with my friends, you shouldn't be saying yes to those types of things, probably. But there definitely should be some no's in there.
I think that's going to be the lesson probably from that movie.
Yeah, probably. But it just made me think of that movie.
I like that. I mean, I think where I was coming from back then, just to clarify, because it's interesting, like you said, right, that you can't say yes to everything, and the parents should say yes to everything.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people inherently say no to themselves before even trying something. Or just an example, like for most people, if they ever had an idea of creating a brand or a podcast or be a YouTuber or whatever it is, right? Something that puts themselves out there, like a musician or a stand-up comedian. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, there's no way anyone's going to find me funny or think that I'm interesting or that this, whatever, right? So what ends up happening is they end up saying no for themselves. So someone's like, hey, man, come out. Let's do karaoke. Like, it's so funny because I love karaoke, right? So I would invite people out, and most people would say, makeup would be like, yeah, that sounds okay. And then when it comes to it, everyone would say no. Because then they're like, oh shit, I gotta sing in front of people, There was then this like private karaoke one where it was like kind of like a lounge, Japanese style, where the idea behind it is that businessmen would go there after work and just get fucked up, so drunk, while drinking in their own private room singing songs. And that way you're only with people like your family, your friends. So there's still a lot of people that are hesitant, but it's a lot easier because they're people and you feel more comfortable with.
Yeah.
So, but it was just kind of like, hey, just try saying yes more, because you know what? You try it once. I always tell people, like, I would even go up and sing with you. Like, we could do a double song, or maybe there's 3 people. Like, that was the thing I would do. And, so many people would still just be like, no, no, no. And some of them had really good voices. Like, I knew that. And it's like, it's just funny that they were like saying no for themselves before even trying it. But I guarantee you, if they would have tried it, and they would have got the entire bar to start clapping along with them, cheering them on, clapping, singing, everything. You're telling me they wouldn't have felt good? That's my point, is that so many people just say no. And
Well, I will say that there have been times where I say no to you before I've tried something. And do you know what I thought of? Russian roulette.
oh no. You want to tell a story?
There was one time that I came home from work, and I think I was coming home from work, and no, maybe it was just later on in the day.
I think so. I think it was wasn't it like a rough day or something? Like something
Yeah.
didn't go well.
And I changed out of my work clothes and got more comfortable, and then he was in the kitchen with a bunch of different glasses, and they all had a clear liquid in them. And he said, okay, we're going to play Russian roulette. And this was in the middle of the week, and I knew I had to work the next day, but I was just like, yeah, I don't think I can do that. And you're like, come on. And I think there were six, or maybe, no, it was maybe 10 glasses. I don't know how many it was.
10 or 12. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe half of them had alcohol and the other half just had water. And I said no. And then he convinced me to participate. And I think my first three were shots. So
I think it was 2, 1 water and shot. But anyway, something like that. It was
Yeah.
really, I was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
she is not choosing the right ones.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
maybe you are.
But also, they were different glasses. And so he had poured them. So he kind of knew which ones were good and which ones were bad. So he had the advantage in this game. But so I was choosing blindly, and he was like, well, I think this one was
Well, I kind of
water.
mixed them up afterwards. I tried to have like a few same glass ones.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But moral of that story is at first I said no, but then I ended up doing it and it was fun. But now I can say I've done it and I never have to do it again if I don't want to.
Well, as you can see, guys, like it's just sometimes trying something out is worth it. And it's probably not always going to work. And sometimes it might suck. And now, the caveat, the fine line, the little text that you can barely see, the talk about the side effects is don't risk it if it's something that actually could like put your life in danger. So I think a lot of people like take that approach to things that are like more adrenaline pumping activities. Like
Skydiving.
you should go skydiving. You should go
Cliff
scuba
jumping.
diving, cliff jumping, things that you have never trained for and are like afraid of
Swim with
heights.
sharks.
Exactly. And
Go white river rafting.
exactly. I just think that you can do those things and you think about it if that's something that you'd actually. But I've seen people that get convinced they're like, oh, I need to start doing adrenaline things. I'm like, why do you need to start doing them? Because people say I should. I'm like, okay, so you're doing it for other people. Good to know. And then they try it and then they absolutely are hating it and they're like crying, they're like trembling. I'm like, oh no. So I think there's like that fine line, right? But do try things because I think it's good to try things, but it's good to say no to people. That's the takeaway. That's going to be the clip. Say yes to trying new things. Say no to people when they ask you for favors. But I mean, do you want me to give another example of that?
Sure.
You're like, that's what you wanted to hear. It's related to, I'm sure a lot of people can relate who work in sales or maybe have gone on salary in their company. So what ends up happening, or just people that have been climbing like their professional corporate ladder. So what ends up happening is that now you start getting a reputation. You're good at what you do. You're like the go-to person. People respect you. People admire you. People like you. Now, especially if it's your boss that thinks you're good, there comes a point where other people can't do it. Or other people can do it, but it takes them 5 hours. They reach out to you, it takes you 5 minutes. So why would they reach out to the other person? Now, what ends up happening though is that people start texting you at any hour of the day. They call you whenever, they email you whenever, and they expect you to do the work. Because guess what? You probably took that call and you did the work or you solved the problem for them. Could have been in the middle of your Thanksgiving dinner with family and you picked up your boss call. And I know I used to be like that. I would take the shifts. They would call me the weekend like, hey, it's the first weekend I had off in the timeshare company in a long time. They're like, hey, can you pick up a shift? We need more numbers at this event. And like it already started. And I'm like, well, why didn't you schedule me in the first place? And I'm like, oh, you know.
No, I don't. That's why I'm asking.
They were trying to be fair.
Got it.
Because I would always get everything. So they were like, well, let's not get one time.
Yeah.
And then they would call me in anyway. And I'm like, okay. But then there's times where I'm like, no, I'm actually literally drunk and at a party right now. So I can't come. You know, and
then they get mad at you.
Yep. And it just reminds me of two things. And again, it's not calling out specific people. Maybe it is a little bit, but um, like my bosses in sales would just call me or text me. Usually just call, just whenever they would just call. I literally like in my meetings, like with clients, important ones, and my phone's just going nonstop. And I'm like, look at my damn calendar, and I'm in a meeting, but they can't even put the effort to do 15 seconds to look at the calendar to see if I was busy. So then later on, I would stop updating the calendar, and then they would be like, "Well, why is your calendar not updating?" Because I'm like, no one looks at it anyway. I know what's happening. But the point of the moral of the story is that I would actually stop picking up phone calls after like 5 p.m. or before 8 a.m. Because I'd be getting calls like 7 a.m., 6:45, 6:30, 7, 8, 9, and I'd pick up. So then they just expected that whenever they call, I'm going to pick up. That was really bad. That was really bad. And that's when I started going. And then it also happened with friends and it happened with family. Like, that's basically people not respecting your time. And it's one of the biggest pet peeves of mine and the biggest things that I'm a proponent for is people respecting your time. So, for example, a lot of friends are probably shocked. Like, they're like, well, we used to call you whenever and you would pick up. Now I don't anymore. You got to text me. Be like, hey, can I call you in an hour? Yeah, I have nothing going on at that hour. But what if I had a plan to watch a movie with you? And they just call me. You know how many people would be like, they're watching a movie with their girlfriend, with their wife, with their brother, with their friends, and they would pick up and interrupt what they're doing to take someone else's call. Why? Why are you giving up your time for them? They didn't ask you if you had free time. Once you start having that mentality, and it's basically the mentality of creating boundaries, it's life changing. And people are shocked, but I'm like, no, you gotta text me first, email me first. Let's set up a meeting. I don't have the time available just to take any of your calls.
And it was probably hard coming from being in sales because, if a client is calling, then it's like, you know, where do you find that fine line of whether or not you should be picking up right then and there, or if you should schedule time to, especially when you're first starting, because it's like you want your clients to like you, because when they like you, they want to have meetings. When they want to have meetings, you're able to try to pitch them on something. So that's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yep. That's hard, exactly, because the clients you want to do it still, but then
It's different with like your coworkers, but your clients, you should be mostly available if you're not in a meeting. But then it's like, okay, well, they think that they can call me at 8 p.m. and text me at 8 p.m. because they're having this issue, but you're not support.
yep. I remember the first time I told a client, they're like, "Why didn't you pick up, Fabian?" And I'm like, "It's after hours. Text me or send me an email, and we can talk tomorrow." And I feel like they probably complained to my boss, but it's just like, really, guys?
Yeah.
You know, it's just teaching people how to treat you is really the theme of that. But it's insane once you learn that, because I don't know if I just missed it, but I would say, like, growing up and interacting with so many people as I have, I would say 95% of people that I've met have never learned that. The art of teaching people how to treat them and setting boundaries.
Well, I have a quick story that I can relate.
Please do.
So, at my previous job, since I was there for a really long time, but I was pretty much always the yes person. Like, I would always want to be, helpful wherever I could and do more, just because whenever you're able to do more and you're doing more, that makes you, in my mind, it makes you more of a valuable employee, because you can do all these tasks, do them quicker, you were good at it, etc. And so I was always kind of that yes person that would be doing those tasks and helping out, doing extra work, because I just liked being helpful and being valuable. And kind of towards the end of my time there, it was maybe 6 months or so before I left, but the boss was talking about how all these people were going to get a raise at the company. You know about this. And afterwards, I talked to my boss and I said, I really appreciate this. And there have been things that I've been wanting, extra things that I've been wanting to do, kind of shift my role a little bit and just help out wherever. And there were some things that I was going to take on in my role and help out a little more. And then it was maybe a week later, my boss came to me and said, so unfortunately, don't tell the rest of the staff about these raises because unfortunately they're not going to happen. And normally I would have said, okay, well, with if you are able to promise me with a raise or something like that, I will take on those roles that I was saying that I would because I do want to learn these things and help out with these things. But I ultimately said I am not going to be helping out and doing those things because I was doing that under the assumption that I was going to be getting that raise. And my boss said, well, you should be almost proving yourself in order to get that raise. And I said, well, I've been working here for 9 years. And if the higher ups don't think that I've proved myself at this point, then
We got another problem entirely.
exactly. I've been doing things throughout my time there, just proving myself, doing things before I got a raise for doing those things. So I think I have proven myself in my years being here. So if they don't think that I'm good for what I'm saying I'll do, then that's on them. But
So you'd say,
I
go ahead.
I said no to doing those things that were almost going to be expected of me.
Was that scary at first? Like basically saying no to like, hey boss, I'm not going to do the extra work you want me to do for free.
No, only because it was
You're a
maybe
firecracker.
yes. Well, it was maybe the next day after I found out that the raise was not going to be coming. And, I had time to think about it and assess what I wanted to say, do, etc. And I was just like, no, this isn't right. I've proven myself and I think that I'm worth the raise, but if they don't think that, then they're going to suffer because of it.
I love it. Well, that's really cool that you basically taught them like, hey, look, you first of all, you stood up for your value. I think that's something that we said, like not enough people stand up for like themselves.
Yep.
It's hard. It really is hard, especially because we're almost like conditioned to be like afraid of the punishment that happens if we do stand up. I get punished all the time, but they're so irrelevant punishments that they don't mean anything. Like that's why like I did it so much in all my companies and jobs. Like I'm not, and I just so people know, I'm not just like picking fights with like everyone and the bosses for everything. I'm just like I just want people to start thinking and questioning things. They're like, hey, look, you, for example, related to you, I'm like, you're asking me to take on extra duties. You're not paying me more. I've been doing this job for so long, and I've been doing more. I know you've always been doing more. And now I'm saying no. I'm like, hey, if you want me to do these extra things, I just need more money because they're going to take more time. Like, that's standing up for yourself. But, most people would be like, oh, well, that's rebellious. That's like bad. And I'm like, no. You just know your worth. And I think the reason why most people are afraid, and I'd be curious to hear if you agree with this, but is because they don't think they could get another job. I'm like, you could get another job doing the exact same thing. Honestly, you might even get paid more because, most companies don't like giving raises, but new companies want to lure good
Yep.
employees, so they
Yep.
increase the salary. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, I mean when I kind of stood up for what I felt was right, it felt really, really good because normally I hadn't done that in the past. And I'm like, felt really, really good.
Well, I was super proud of you.
Thank you.
And I think that takes a lot, even just to share it here. I mean, I know you're not as insane as I am and sharing personal stories, so I love that you did that. And it's such a relevant story and really sets the tone to people and gets the message across. So I love that, Stephanie. I want to just look at what these huge comments are before we continue. Major problem with small business startups. I'm going to say it's probably boundaries that he is referencing that we were talking.
Oh my.
No. Where people just like are always on call.
Yep.
My phone goes on D&D outside of specific people at 6 p.m. and doesn't come off on 7 a.m. on weekdays. Yep. It's such a problem. I mean, and I just see it all the time in the movies, right? Where you see that the trope that the dad usually, but sometimes like the super successful businesswoman who's like climbing the ladder and like she's never home, she's always working, she's always on call, the kids are suffering. I'm just like, oh, like it's even when it starts getting portrayed in movies and like TV shows, you're like, okay, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because that means it's just common knowledge.
Yep.
But it's common knowledge and no one's doing anything about it. I'm like, that's where I'm just like trying to stand up for,
I mean, we're watching House of Cards right now. Yes, I'm a little behind on that one, but it is a little different because when you're in a government setting, there's just a lot more happening all the time and you need to be available. But, it just makes me think of that and just there are characters that they never spend time with their families. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
They have a life?
Exactly. But I don't think that everyone should be in those shoes.
Yeah.
They should be making time for themselves, for their families, for their whatever they want to be doing. They shouldn't be on call 24/7.
Yeah. Well, I like that you shared that. I think there's always exceptions to everything. So one thing that obviously we're preaching like these messages and themes so hard, but I think that there are exceptions to every single thing. Like in the government, like you said, like, hey, Russia just dropped a bomb or a drone strike somewhere and people have died. Like,
and the president's not available.
He is currently watching a TV show with his wife. So come back in 6 hours. Yep. So yeah, I think there's always exceptions. But
yep.
It's just a good habit to I think start practicing, and over time you start realizing when you can do it, when you should do it, and when you can't. But I think the hardest part is just doing the first few times because you're like, oh my god, something bad's gonna happen if I do this. And if something does, I guess my point is that I just want to share, and I'll be curious what you feel is, then you probably are in the wrong environment.
And also, is the situation life and death?
Yeah.
Especially with like in a work setting. Okay, let's just say with medical industry, like is the EHR isn't working. Okay, that's a problem, but there's good old paper too. Like you can figure out a way to make it work in the time. And also, if that's happening at 8 p.m., like, I don't know what doctor's office is still working at 8 p.m. unless it's like a hospital or something like that.
Or a Mexico dentist office.
Oh my goodness.
Shout out to my mom.
Yes.
With her late night appointments.
Yeah. But is it, some people, I think they just need to take a step back and just try to troubleshoot by yourself and think about, is it a life or death situation or can it wait until the next day, the next work day? Can you make something else work in the meantime?
Hello, entitlement. I'm going to see what this essay is. A valuable employee is productive during business hours. The separation of work and home life is vital. People are too worried about proving themselves by working extra hours and whatnot. However, at the end of the day, you burn out, and then when you don't do those extra things, the employer now expects it. I think that's a great summary.
Yep.
We're going to put John Kramer's message as a clip or like a tweet or a quote, one of those like motivational quotes right
Yes.
here, if that's okay with you, brother. But What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's honestly perfectly said.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think I'm just thinking like if let's say right now we had hired someone to edit our episodes and like do the like lighting and all the technical stuff and like post on social media for us. And I'm just like, "Oh my goodness, we need 3 posts right now ASAP or else the world is ending." I'm like, "You know what, guys? Like we missed the post. We are going to lose some growth, we're going to lose some exposure, but is it really the end of the world, you know?"
Right.
Like I just
I think that's a good way to think about it. Like, is it the end of the world, or is the world going to keep spinning
yeah.
on its flat surface? I'm just kidding, by the way.
Well, I forget what clip I have. Or check out ABI, guys. My 3 cents ABI. But there's a clip where or a part where I'm like, so you're outgrowing people and this like, and a lot of people are like afraid because they're like you did it and you were like them. And then I'm like, well, what if someone tries to argue to you that there's no oxygen or the Earth is flat? And I'm like, so that's what I thought about.
Yeah.
My crazy stories and analogies and
Yes.
stuff like that and metaphors.
Yep.
I
You're
think they
very
get the
good
point
at it.
across.
Yep. Yep. They're very helpful.
Well, thanks for everyone tuning in. We're gonna start wrapping up soon, but I
Yep.
kind of wanted to finish this episode with sharing maybe a story from our Mexico trip. What are your thoughts on that? I mean,
Yeah. Did you have one in mind?
no, I probably should have, but I was just thinking there's so much that went down. Like it was such a good trip. I mean, you want us to tell the people where we went and kind of all that stuff? I know we had probably briefly mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, we went to Playa del Carmen. And it's been over a month since we've been back, and we've already lost our tans. Sad face.
Oh,
But we were there for a week, and we stayed at 2 different resorts. I mean, there's a whole backstory behind that, but I really enjoyed splitting our time between 2 different resorts. I mean, I don't think we would have gotten bored at just staying at one of them, but it was nice being able to not necessarily compare, but compare between the two and just see how they were different. But back to a story.
well, let's just. This is a good one.
Okay.
Drinking that quantity because Mexico's all inclusive, so started early so that we could drink all day.
Exactly.
But I'm thinking about Valentine when we have
And
to
plus,
walk
that
back
also
and got
helps
lost.
with like the hangover when you just start drinking again.
But do you remember that night at the Valentine? Like it was one of the first days we had just drank a lot, but it was a great time. We hadn't overdone it, but it was a very large resort, so things blend together. There's a lot of nature, trees, plants, flowers, paths everywhere, and it was like, oh my.
By the way, the Valentine Imperial, oh my goodness, the grounds are so beautiful. So definitely shout out to them.
But what I was thinking was, remember when? Well, the two things. One, how picky in particular they were about my clothing.
Yes.
You want to tell them?
Yes. Well, we had read in reviews that at certain restaurants there are dress codes and they do follow them. But of course, someone
I don't know what you're talking about.
wanted to push those limits, and they were like, because most of the restaurants, they wanted the guys to wear long pants. Like that was one of their requirements for the dress code. And so he had brought some nice pairs of shorts, and he decided to wear a nice pair of shorts the first night that we were going to dinner. And he just kept getting turned away at every restaurant that we tried.
I tried pitching them and everything because
Yep. And he also tried like hiding behind me so that they wouldn't notice. But they stuck to their guns for sure.
I mean I respect it, but
Yeah.
I guess see that's I talk about all these stories about saying no to people and all these stuff like that. But I'm so used to like this is really bad to admit, but because of my sales expertise, you want to say something?
No, no.
I was just like,
You're just used to people saying yes.
yeah, because then I
You're used to sliding.
getting away with it.
Yeah.
So I would be like, okay, guys, I apologize. I for some reason completely forgot, and we are celebrating something or whatever.
Can you just let it slide this one time?
Like so
Tomorrow
it's
I'll
my
be
birthday,
better.
and we have to walk all the way back to our room. It's going to take 20 minutes, and we're starving. We're feeling ill because we were drinking a lot. Like, please. And then most people be like, okay, just this one time. I'm like, absolutely, man. And we're going to come back here tomorrow, and you're going to see me in my long pants. And most people would say yes to that. But these guys, they're like, nope, nope, nope.
And then you
nope.
tried speaking Spanish to
I'm
them.
like, oye, amigo, hablo español. And they're still like, nope. I'm like, oh my, because like usually that's like the instant win. Like you just speak the same language as them. Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, what up, compadre? Hello, cabron.
No.
But anyway, it just was super fascinating to me that they stuck to their guns. But remember when we started walking back, what ended up happening? Because everything kind of looked the same.
Oh my. No,
The wrong room.
Yeah, that was at the end of the night though. That wasn't before dinner.
Okay, got it. But we kept drinking.
Yep.
So then
Yep.
you want to tell it?
No, you can tell.
No. So basically what ended up happening was after dinner they had live music, which is actually something so cool about like these resorts is that they have the opportunity that you don't have to wear a mask because everyone who goes there has been tested and has no COVID. So it was really cool to have like that normalcy. Mm-hmm. Anyway, live music, lots of drinking. Then we're going back to the room, and I thought that was where we came from. So it's like maybe midnight or something like that, and I'm trying to like open the door with the key card. That's like me trying to unlock it, and it just didn't unlock it. I'm like, no. Because a lot of the hotel key guards have the issue where, like, if you get too close to your phone or something magnetic or you get them wet, they lose their unlock ability.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, we're going to have to walk all the way back to the front to get this changed. I'm like, oh. So then I'm like, but we kept going. I'm like, let me try one more time, the other one. And, like, I'm doing it harder and harder. And then all of a sudden, we hear this voice from this lady. It's like, hello? Can I help you? What's going on? And we're like, oh no! I'm like, someone is in our room. And then, actually, what it was is I'm like, hold on. I'm like, wait, what? And then I didn't answer anything else, and the only thing I answered was like, what room is this? Like, I'm not like, oh, I'm sorry to disturb you, or I'm like, what room is this? And she's like, it's 711 or something. And I'm like, oh, yeah, oopsie, wrong room. Sorry about that. I was like, oh, no.
Because at that resort, everything kind of looks the same. Like for the most part, like a lot of the buildings look the same. So, and on the actual like door, it only said like the last three numbers of the room, but it actually started with like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. But it only said 117 instead of 7117, but we were like 8117. And so, yeah, oopsie. And it was our first night at the resort. So it's like we weren't really familiar with the grounds yet. And we just needed to walk a little bit further to get to the right building.
And then we like walked like 10 feet. And
yep.
then there's
and it was like a big floor mat right in front of the building saying it's 8.
I'm like, oh no.
So,
well, I think that's a great and we'll definitely be sharing more stories over time. But I just thought, as you can see, guys, mistakes happen, but you just gotta embrace it. It's a funny story. Do it for the story.
Yes, do it for the story and view it in a positive light.
Yes. Let's see what. Este episodio me pareció excelente. El comentario lo escribí en español porque el corrector me cambia la palabra y pone cosas raras. That's funny. He's like when he's writing it in English. it autocorrects to like something else.
Yeah.
But gracias, papa. So thank you, Dad. He was basically saying that this was an excellent episode, great content, and he was writing in Spanish because of the autocorrect. But love that. I love that you guys tuned in. As again, this is kind of more like free flowing. We're trying right now, having a few pre-planned stories, especially as we grow the audience. I know that, I mean, maybe we change the time down the road to closer to 3 to 5, and the happy hours changed later too, because I know it's midweek and people are at work and all this
Yep.
stuff, so it's harder to like spend a full hour and 15 minutes with us, because that's kind of what we've been averaging right now.
Yeah.
But I think
Well, we would love to hear what everyone has to say about it. You know, if there is a better time that kind of works for everyone, and there's just a general consensus, you know, we're open to changing the time. If we need to push it back a little bit later, then we can reassess that. But just let us know what you think, and we would love to hear your guys' stories. So feel free to send us something via email or through social media, and maybe next time we can invite someone to share their stories.
yes, yes. So please, again, like she said, send us an email at chamingerx at chaminger.com. Send us a message on any of our social medias. And if you have like a story that you want to tell, or if you have like, hey, this happened to me 10 years ago, what are your commentary on it? And we would love to have that, because at the end of the day, we do want more interactions with you guys. We want other perspectives other than just our own, even though we have great perspectives.
Yes.
But it's a ongoing thing, and at the end of the day, you guys have an opportunity to ask us questions as well. I mean, how many brands and podcasts and businesses can you talk to the owners and founders and be like, hey, what's your favorite drink? You know, like it's a lot. That's a lot more challenging. And I know, like at restaurants, the manager or owner comes out and says, "How did you like your meal?" And
What accent was that supposed to be?
I have no idea.
Got it. But just remember, tomorrow we do have a happy hour at 4 o'clock Mountain Time. So that would be 6 o'clock Eastern.
And I'll be sharing a lot of stories about basically like socialization tips and some of my crazy techniques that I did to have always successful parties and get people going, because I think a lot of people struggle with ramping up and having a great like dinner party or even a larger thing. And I'll be sharing some of the stuff that literally work 100% of the time. Don't miss it. And we got one more comment here that I'm just going to read. We enjoyed coffee with you. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. We appreciate that. It means a lot.
Yes. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the engagement, and for you tuning in, of course.
Yep. All right, guys. Coffee is finished. And if not, it's cold. So gotta warm it up. And if you know me, you know what that means. Be free. Be you.
Stay amazing.
Challenge out. Oopsie. I definitely messed up the order of that.